Morning, everybody. I'm super excited to welcome Rachel Travis, Director of Global Programs at Smartsheet. Rachel, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I know we've been going back and forth for a bit, and I'm looking forward to meeting you at our Denver event next week. So thank you for being here, but I'd love to have you take a minute or two and introduce yourself to our audience.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so Rachel Travis, as Sugata said, I'm the director of global partner programs at Smartsheet. But prior to that, I actually served in the Army for about 6 years, ultimately by way of West Point, the United States Military Academy. And I really enjoyed my time at the military academy. I was lucky enough, fortunate enough to be recruited to play volleyball at the academy, and then also got to compete on our track and field team. And really spent a lot of my time there just honing, obviously, my leadership capabilities and skills, and how do you really build and develop a high performing team. And that's really what I've spent my career since then focusing on. So after graduation, I went down to Fort Jackson, where I began my officer basic training, and then ultimately came out to Fort Carson here in Colorado, where I worked with a sustainment brigade, ultimately responsible for providing all of the logistics and maintenance and any items that you could imagine our combat brigades would need while they are deployed. Ultimately deployed to Afghanistan and spent 15 months in Afghanistan. Learned a whole lot during that time, and faced some challenging times. But ultimately, I think the biggest lesson they took away is again, how do you care for people in challenging times, and really lead with empathy, and that's something that I continue to take forward in my career now out of the military. After redeployment back to the States, I was fortunate enough to work with the Wounded Warrior units, and at Fort Carson we had an entire battalion, and that was really a rewarding experience, getting to spend time with our warfighters that ultimately needed time to recover and heal, either before returning to the fighting force or transitioning to civilian life. So it was a very unique experience, very rewarding experience, but also very challenging experience. And then after that, I actually transitioned as well, and I joined a management consulting firm that really was my chance to cut my teeth in corporate America. And that's where I learned a lot about go-to-market strategies, customer-centric growth strategies, and really learned everything that I do about partnerships and channel strategy and go-to-market motions. So I spent almost 11 and a half years working in that space. And then coming from that, I joined Smartsheet. And I've been there for about 3.5 years now.
That's amazing. So, first of all, thank you for your service. And I'd love to take a moment and go back to the possibly the time or time frame when you're deciding to join West Point. Can you
Mm-hmm.
kind of walk us through, like, how did you came to that conclusion?
Yeah.
It's been an amazing journey, so I'd love to spend a few minutes with you.
For sure. Yeah. So as a young kid, I didn't come from a military family. And so as I was looking at where I wanted to go to college, the West Point opportunity, the coaching staff there reached out, and I really just started to look at what the academy is all about, what it offers, and what it could mean for career paths and opportunities longer term. And the leadership development was something that really spoke to me as a college or as a high school kid. I always was the captain of the team, and I always really enjoyed that leadership position and opportunity. And so for it to be known as such a prestigious leadership development school is really what spoke to me. And then obviously serving and really getting to hone those skills in some of the most challenging environments is really what spoke to me, and why I chose to go to the academy. And I was just privileged enough that I got to continue my athletics career as a part of that.
So, can you share a little bit about your deployment overseas in Afghanistan? Like, how did that come about? What was the major takeaways from a leadership perspective that you kind of learned there?
Yeah, I mean, so I went to deployed to Afghanistan in 2007 which was right in the middle of our surge in Iraq. And so Afghanistan was a really challenging theater of operations for us at that time, because a lot of the resources and just the focus back home was on Iraq and not Afghanistan. And so it was challenging. We were there with the 82nd Airborne Division, and it took a lot of, for lack of a better term, just grit when you're not getting the resources and the support that the fighting force is really needing to be successful. It takes creativity and an entire team to figure out, hey, how do we get these supplies to this forward operating base at this time to support this mission. And we were lucky. While we were there, we worked across nations. So we had the International Securities Armed Forces group, which had the Brits, the Poles, the Kiwis, the Germans, as well as Army, Marines, Navy, and Air Force. And so it was really there that I also learned, okay, obviously, how do I take care of my team, but how do you build those relationships to be able to successfully collaborate across different cultures, different policies and process for how these other teams operate, and really having to learn what it takes to be successful, because we are all ultimately working towards the same mission. So I think it was a lot of challenging times, difficult situation, obviously, that we were under. But again, it was an opportunity to figure out, okay, how can I build the relationships with people that are different backgrounds, different cultures, ultimately different priority, to get them to coalesce and come together to be successful with whatever the mission was of that time. And obviously do it all while under immense pressure and threat from the Taliban that we were under. So it was incredibly challenging, but also just rewarding. I built relationships with people that I never would have met in any other circumstance, right? Than just happening to be deployed together in Afghanistan, which kind of feels odd, but still friends to this day with some of the folks. So
That is amazing. So one question I guess I have, when we think about ecosystems, nothing could be as complex as the military, because the consequences also are severe on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about your transition from sort of the service life to sort of the civilian life, are there similarities that you're able to carry forward, or are there things that are so fundamentally different they don't apply?
No, I absolutely, and it's funny you ask that, because when I transitioned, one of the things I often caught myself saying is, guys, this isn't life or death, right? I just came from life or death. There's ways that we can think about this and break this down that make it more palatable. I think, and that's a skill that I definitely honed in the service. Is you're given a very large mission or task, and you have to find a way to break it down into smaller bite-sized tasks that individual teams or people can ultimately take and run with. And I think that's something that's definitely translated from my military career into now my civilian career, is how do you take a very big, ambiguous challenge, which partnerships often are, right? There's a lot of ambiguity to taking a very strategic concept or idea to getting it down into a task at a level that people can execute against. And so I think that translates very, very well, and something that I've definitely taken advantage of. And I think the other thing is the ability just to build the relationships and be able to lead and influence others that you don't have direct authority with. And so again, that was something that during my time in Afghanistan, obviously as a lieutenant in the US Army, I have absolutely zero authority over somebody in the Polish Army or somebody in the Kiwi Air Force, right? But I need them to work with us to get supplies out to a FOB, or to figure out how do we reroute an existing supply chain. And so the ability to build the relationships and define a vision in a way that people can coalesce around for the greater good, because at the end of the day, partnerships is all about creating win-win-wins, right? What's good for from a vendor standpoint, what's good from the partner standpoint, but ultimately you got to be able to create wins for the customers. Otherwise, you're all out of it. So I think that has been a skill that really has translated well, not just for how to work with partners, but then also just internally with our teams, as far as from strategy to sales to marketing to ops, et cetera. You have to be able to paint that picture and get people to align around a common vision.
So when you think about your sort of engagement in Afghanistan, where you talked about your responsible logistics,
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming it included heavy machineries and all kind of equipments and everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you take that and come into a pure play software world where you are sort of dealing with bits and bytes
Mm-hmm.
versus actual physical things and inventory and logistics and operations, are there things that apply and are there things that don't apply?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that obviously what it is, it's not boxes and bullets and fuel and everything else, right? So the what's or the widgets, if you will, obviously totally different. But I think the concepts and the frameworks are consistent. You going back to what I said earlier about an objective, you have a mission. Translate that to there is a priority for the company. There's a strategy that you need to achieve, and like I said, some of that is very clear. Other bits of it are quite ambiguous. Similar, go back to the military. There's a mission that may or may not have a concrete time frame, but it has a loose objective, right? There's certain people that you're looking for, or certain area or territory you need to gain control of, right? But it's fluid, right? So I think from that standpoint, the what often obviously is very different, but the thinking behind how you go about planning for that to enable then the SMEs, if you will, to be able to execute to their best ability to ensure success, that is very similar. It's a problem solving mindset and framework to thinking about how do you deploy your best resources, your best assets in a way that enables them to do what they do best in the most streamlined and efficient way possible. And that's something that I think is very consistent, regardless of whether it's the military or hardware or now in SaaS, right? I think those things definitely translate.
So when you take sort of your military operations framework
Mm-hmm.
and you apply that to the partner operations framework, can you walk us through a little bit your journey as a consultant when you're working with all these different companies? Were there a common framework that you use when it comes to putting together a partner ops strategy and programs and execution plans?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. When you think about from an operations standpoint, we were always every good consultant, right, loves a 2x2, and so we tended to operate from a 2x2. But ultimately, you were forced to make a series of trade-offs around effectiveness and efficiency. And I think depending on what the tasks were, some things it was we need to be able to do this at scale very efficiently, whereas in other instances it was the effectiveness, it was the depth of the expertise that was really more important. So what do I mean by that? Thinking about from a channel operations standpoint, all of the different responsibilities that ultimately fall under that umbrella, there are certain tasks around, I think more of the from a program operations standpoint, and the types of analytics that are often needed to support your channel capacity planning and your program analytics and performance measurement, as well as then any of the compensation metrics that you design. There's some frameworks and some expertise that's needed to really be able to drive that forward and make sure that you're continually improving and delivering the value back to the business. And so there it tended to be, well, let's focus on the effectiveness and the expertise. Whereas when we're thinking about the work to be done to support partner recruitment and onboarding and deal desk and those types of things, those tend to be, if you're doing it right, you need efficiency, you need scale, right? That if you're doing it right and you have the volume coming in through your channels, you need efficient coverage globally. And so those that's where we tended to look at efficiency. So that's really the framework we often make is, hey, do we need the expertise and effectiveness that somebody can do this and look around the corner and keep us on the front foot, or is this just a pure we need to be able to do this in the most streamlined, efficient way possible, and then making sure that you have the appropriate supporting structures around how do you make sure that we can manage this and provide the appropriate guidance and direction, and it ties into the broader company leadership team. So it was the individual doers were often trade-off between, like I said, effectiveness and efficiency, and then you look at how do you build the team from there so you can manage it and make sure that you're plugging in to your counterparts across the rest of the organization to make sure that you are always aligned with the broader company strategy.
That's amazing. So, with the guests that I've had on the show here, we've been sort of discussing partner operations, our partner ops framework, which is kind of starting with strategize, recruit, onboard, enable, sort of the first four pillars, and then co-market, co-sell, incentivize, and accelerate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about a large enterprise organization like Smartsheet, several thousands of people, it's a multi-product line now today compared to what it was 10
Yep.
years ago. And you have hundreds of resellers and partners. So can you kind of walk us through which of those pillars, the front half or the back half, you spend most of your time on when it comes to partner operations, and how do you decide where to spend time on? What is that approach you have today?
Yeah, so I probably over index on the two ends of that. And so I spend a lot of time making sure that we have the right strategy, we have the right alignment with the broader sales organization, and then making sure that from a strategy standpoint, how that translates into what ultimately gets done is the program, and making sure that the program delivers on what we need from our partners so that we can be successful against that strategy. So I do over index and spend a lot of time there, because if we get those pieces right, then it'll tell us who's the ideal partner that we need to be recruiting. It'll also inform from an onboarding and an enablement standpoint, what do we need to make sure that they have and they're equipped and they're ready to go for. So if I get the strategic standpoint and all of that from a what is the strategy, and then where do we need what types of partners as part of that strategy, that sets us up then so our partner account managers know, okay, this country, here's the current capacity that I have and these types of partners, but I have this gap. So I need to go out and find partners that look and feel and smell like this for this country. This country, I need something totally different, right? But they have a very clear sort of understanding of who they need to go recruit, what they look like, and where to go hunt for them. And then same thing from an onboarding standpoint, we've invested quite a bit in our tooling, whereby we have role-based onboarding for all of our different partner types, and 30, 60, 90-day check-ins and everything else. So we've invested a bit there to make that a better experience for ourselves as well as our new partners. So I spent a lot of time strategy. And then on that backside, it is really about looking at what are the leading and lagging indicators of whether or not all this middle stuff is working, right? So that it can then inform what changes we may need to make either to the strategy or the program. The strategy may be solid still, but the way that we implemented it via the program didn't yield the right results, right? So that's sort of I spend most of my time on the two ends of the spectrum, and leave the team really to focus on what they do best, which is recruiting and onboarding and enabling those partners.
So coming back to the first part of this puzzle,
Mm-hmm.
into the strategy part and the onboarding part, what is your process? How do you go through that? How do you run the numbers?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you get together? It happens once a quarter, a couple of times a year. What is that framework? How do you do that?
Yep. So our big exercise is really once a year. We do obviously assess each quarter and make tweaks as needed, but it's a top down and a bottoms up approach, right? We want to understand big picture where the market's going and what the total market looks like, but then similarly from a bottoms up, both looking at existing customers and prospects, where is the opportunity, how do they want to engage, what do they want to buy, who do they want to buy from, et cetera, and really defining those routes to market to best fit how and what the customer wants and who we can give it to them through, right? And making sure that we have those clear routes to market with the right level of resourcing because then we go through our capacity planning, right? So internally, we obviously have to size our sales force and our territories. We go through the same exercise for our partner ecosystem and really try to understand how many of what types of partners do we need in any given geography. But then we also add in the industry layer to that, right? Recognizing that we tend to be great generalists. Our partners bring that deep industry expertise and customer intimacy that we just don't have. So that's the other aspect. We do all of the tops down sort of total addressable market, and then the bottoms up saying, okay, well, based on what we think is our fair share, if you will, and what our reach is, we get an estimate for a number and types of partners by route to market, and then align that to our program and understand, okay, if we need this many partners and each partner of this type and shape should carry a book of X, right? It gives us a guide rails, if you will, from a program standpoint, what we would expect and want them to deliver, as well as then types of investment in the team that we want them to make as far as getting trained and certified in not only our product, but in how to implement it as well.
That makes a lot of sense. So can you share a little bit about your sizes of your ecosystem, types of partners you have, how they have evolved, and kind of where you think they're going?
Sure. Yeah, we've actually been on a bit of an interesting journey over the last 3 years. So when I joined, like I said, about 3.5 years ago now, we had roughly 800 partners in our ecosystem, and from your traditional sort of VARs, distributors, to solution partners, to more just services, SI partners. And we revamped the program because we needed partners who were really going to focus on building their Smartsheet practice, not just from we can implement it, but we're going to actually go out and sell software. The VARs that we had, or the distributors that we had, were really just a procurement vehicle and not proactively selling. And so we evolved the program to say, hey, this is what we need. We need you obviously to continue to deploy and develop and implement incredible Smartsheet solutions, but we also need you to build that commercial arm to generate your own demand and close that demand. And so as part of that, redefining the program, we actually ended up terminating about 60% of our partner ecosystem. So we went from, like I said, roughly 800 down to 350 partners. And they were our core producing partners that were really the ones that are proactive, leaning in, really working with us to grow the business. And then over the last 2 years, we've actually grown that. We're back up to about 775 partners. And we've also expanded our partners. So as I mentioned, we had traditional VARs, solution partners, services, and SI partners. We've now, part of that 775 we have technology alliances, we have ISVs, we have developers, as well as we're expanding our ecosystem of our traditional channel partners. We're expanding our SIs with bringing on some new GSIs into our ecosystem. So really, it's about building that full, complete ecosystem, recognizing the very different and valuable roles that they play in our Smartsheet community.
So are there specific like when we used Smartsheet 10 years ago and the way we use now, there's a vast difference. There's so many capabilities you have, all the way from program management to product management, and of course the core financial capabilities that you had from day one. But going back to your partner network, are there specific common set of use cases that you think they push based on whether they're an accounting services or a VAR or a reseller? Are there a cluster of solutions that they sell differently, or they all tend to send similar things?
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting. We definitely see a bit of both. And I think when I joined, like I said, 3.5 years ago, it was a little bit of, we had over 2,000 use cases, right? And we sort of prided ourselves on the fact of, like, there isn't anything that we can't do, right? There's no business problem that we can't solve using Smartsheet. And that's how a lot of the growth happened, is it was so flexible and there was so much that you could do. And internally now we've had to focus and pivot more and really say, okay, what are the areas that we're going to invest and go deep in? And it's around our PPM, right? Project and portfolio management, PMO, and then just digital transformation type efforts. And that's really where we've focused. And we've, like I said, we've seen partners kind of do two things. Some of them said, well, hey, if Smartsheet's going to focus in these three areas, well, somebody still needs to do all the other flexible things that you guys used to do. And so some of them are choosing to continue to basically say, hey, any problem, I can solve it in Smartsheet across but they bring that industry flavor. And then we have others that have decided to say, hey, no, I'm gonna become a PMO COE essentially, and I want to have that PMO COE flavor for an industry. Or then you have the others that are going to just process improvement, automation of workflows, and that efficiency play for manufacturing, right? So we are seeing a bit of bifurcation, if you will, where some of our partners were like, hey, we liked that flexibility play. Like that was easy for us to sell. And they're going to continue to kind of fill that gap that we strategically moved away from. And then you have others that are like, okay, I understand the vision and these are the focus areas, but I'm going deep in an industry and bringing that expertise. So that's what we're seeing. And there's pros and cons to both. But it's been an interesting sort of 2 years and how we've refocused internally and what our partners have decided to do as a result of that.
That makes a lot of sense. So I just want to make sure for our audience, a couple of the acronyms you said. One is Project Management Office, PMO. Another one is Center of Excellence, COE.
Correct. Yep.
So there is a great push in SaaS, especially with AI now, verticalization of SaaS, so that you have not just in manufacturing, because you can manufacture $5 widgets and hundreds of $1 million of tanks or whatever the other world that you came from. So those offices look very, very different. So do you see in your partner base, the consulting houses, that's where they go through a complete lifecycle management on the customer. They start with a little proof of concept and they kind of grow from that. Are they very different from an accounting house where they're just using for transactional tax purposes? Like, do you see these two different universes, or do you tend to see a cluster around more PMO and lifecycle management workflows and et cetera?
Yep. Yeah. So I think if you go back to that 350 that we retained, that group of folks, they're really they want to retain that jack of all trades, right? And we're trying to get them to declare an area of expertise. So we're trying to incentivize them to, like, what do you want to be known for, right? We want to put dollars and invest behind our partners that, hey, when you have a healthcare customer that needs some process optimization or some portfolio management, like they need to get a better grasp of what are their equipment's coming end of life, right? Whatever it may be. And we're trying to push, like, is that your thing, right? Because we want to be able to have quick and easy at the ready. And that's where we're actually investing in some of our AI capabilities, is to proactively surface up partners that have specific expertise areas, both in app as well as to our sellers in Salesforce using Agentforce. And so we're pushing it. And that those legacy 350, they're coming along, but it's a little more challenging. Whereas when going back to what I was saying earlier about really looking at the channel capacity and understanding in a given geography, who are the customers that we're going after and what industries and what size companies, et cetera, and who are the partners that best serve those customers, they tend to get it and be much more specialized, either in an industry or in a use case area, whether that is having a PMO center of excellence because they service and they're a member of I'm drawing a blank, the PMO industry conference. Yeah. And so we are seeing the newer partners. And so part of that is from our standpoint, we were much more strategic in, we weren't just going after Smartsheet fans, right? We now needed these partners that had this very specific expertise, either in an industry or in a use case, and had customers or prospects for us that already in their network that we were very specifically going after. So newer partners are much more specialized, and it's an advantage for them right now because it makes it much easier to find when I need a partner in France who is an expert in PMO ops versus what we have in some of our legacy partners, if you will.
So from the partner perspective, when you look at these consulting houses that are going into workflow related activities, and you brought up Agentforce. So do you tend to see people who tend to do well on like CRM, ERP, those type of tools, they tend to do well with your deployment, or is it more of a generic capability like an agency that is in creative services wants to do program management? They can, like, when you think about the
Mhm.
resell motion,
Mhm.
where do you see velocity in your ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, so the resale motion is honestly, we are still, our fastest is with the line of business owners. That rogue purchase, right? That helps a line of business owner move something along in a much more automated, efficient manner. So that still remains where the velocity ultimately lies for us, is within a specific function and pain point. But we are seeing more and more, and from a company standpoint, we're focusing more and more on the enterprise and truly being an enterprise grade. And what we're seeing now is some of our larger partners, our GSI partners, are really helping some of these enterprise companies establish internal COEs around PMO or portfolio management, or even with some of the pharmaceutical companies or med tech companies around trials, and how do we use Smartsheet to optimize the clinical trials process in motion, and making sure that things are moving more streamlined. So we are seeing a larger enterprise play, but it's obviously a longer sales cycle and process there, and more players, right? So partners partnering with partners to ultimately bring that to light. But the pure velocity still tends to be with line of business, much more point solutions, and then we grow from there.
Got it. And so how do you put sort of incentive structure together? Because it seems like you have a broad, sort of complex set of partners that have various specialties, various mechanism, and possibly
Mhm.
various
Mhm.
sales outreach also. So what is your overall incentive framework there?
Yeah, so we also have changed the way that we reward, incentivize partners, because one of the things that was a bit of a exercise to get people to understand, but at the end of the day, the customer is the one that's going to decide how they buy and who they buy from, right? And we had partners that in the legacy model that would be hurt by that, right? If a partner ultimately was working a deal and then they decided, hey, I'm going to buy this direct from Smartsheet because I prefer to engage directly with the vendor, or hey, I actually have to purchase this through an SHI or an Insight. That's how I procure, or even an AWS, right? I procure all of my software through that mechanism. That hurt the partner in the past, right? And so we've evolved and really have recognized all of the different roles and ways that partners add value to our ecosystem, whether they are sourcing the deal, whether they're transacting the deal, whether they're just influencing the deal. We track all of that now in our Salesforce environment on every opportunity, and we have different types of either upfront discounts or commission fees or back end sort of rebates, as well as other spiffs that we deploy to drive certain behaviors. So we've really tried to be pretty specific based on the type of partner it is and the type of role that they typically play in our ecosystem, and making sure that we are, one, able to appropriately identify and track that activity and that behavior, but then also we're rewarding them as well. And I mean, a lot of times it's not just about that financial. It's hey, great. How do you get me exposed to more customers of this type that have this similar problem that I can then go and service and support as well. So it's not always about just the financial incentive, whether it's a discount or a fee or a rebate, but it's about how do I help them scale and tell this story. So we've also invested a lot in taking success stories from our customers and really packaging them into a demand generation asset that they can use. So we try to be flexible in what we do based on the partner's business model and what value they provide to us, and how do we help them scale that.
That's amazing. So I want to double click a little bit, going back to your operational framework. Can you share a little bit about your organizational structure, how it was, how it has evolved? Because it looks like when you went through a strategy, you went through realignment, you
Mhm.
pruned partner base, you refocused on a certain type to increase velocity and coverage. So now, if you look back 3 years ago when you took over and where you're now, and
Mhm.
maybe you can share a little bit where you're going, then we want to end with the discussion of AI that we're having a few minutes earlier.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the org that I joined was very small, very scrappy. There weren't many sort of lines of role and responsibility, and it was sort of an all hands on deck approach. We've grown and we've matured where we have the team aligned to the jobs to be done, if you will. So we've grown our partner account managers, so they aren't just you have a list of 20 random partners to no, you're going to manage a specific type of partner because you understand their business model, you understand how they want to engage with us, how they want to engage with our sellers, how they want to engage with other partners. So we've introduced that type of, I don't like the term specialization, but specialization to the role as far as, hey, you're going to manage our GSIs, or you're going to manage our traditional VARs, or you're going to manage our distributors, right? Whatever it may be, because they understand the motion, the model, and the program that we use to support that. But then we've also introduced true enablement function. So we actually have an enablement team that's responsible for training and enabling our partners and sort of being that first point of contact around any troubleshooting issues that our partners run into, whether it's they had an issue trying to register a deal, or hey, they're in the middle of the implementation and they're not getting a response from whoever that they need help with. So we've invested in that function, and that's been invaluable for us as well. And then we've obviously built out our operations team, our programs team, and our marketing team. Those were all size of one previously, and that's just not obviously scalable as you grow the ecosystem out and mature your program. So we've invested in those roles as well to really enable us to serve the different regions, their regional allocations, so we can grow our partner ecosystem outside of the US.
So speaking of putting a team together, a lot of people are talking about hiring agents now. And because you're a Salesforce user, what are your thoughts on deploying AI in accelerating productivity? How are you looking at this?
Yeah, so it's definitely something that we're very much in the middle of trying to figure out the best use. I think I'm not a believer that there's an agent for everything and that's the best approach, but an agent can definitely add value and accelerate a real person's ability to make the right decision. And so that's how we're really trying to deploy agents both in app as well as in taking advantage of our Salesforce agent force. But really it's how do we use agents to surface the information that can help our customers or help our sellers get the information or solve the problem that they have faster and more efficiently. So in app, we're working with our product team to figure out, hey, how can we take the information that we know about the customer, industry use cases that they're currently using the product for, size of company, who is the buyer, et cetera, to when they're trying to build a solution, that if we have a partner that is already a known expert or they already have a pre-built template or additional bolt-on integration or app that addresses that need, that we can proactively surface that information up to the customer in app using AI. So that's one of the use cases that we're building out. And then obviously with Agentforce, similar, but our sellers all the time are reaching out asking, hey, do you have a partner that can do this? Or hey, do you have a partner that speaks this language? And so just using Agentforce to make that a much faster and easier proactive serving up of ideal partners that can meet that need versus a reactive waiting for the rep to realize, oh, maybe a partner is better served for this. So that's another big one that we're focusing on as well at the moment. And then where we go from there is sort of, let's see. There's no shortage of potential things that we could do, but those are our two near term focus areas.
From an approach wise, Rachel, is it more need based, or is there you have a team that's specifically looking at how to use AI to drive productivity? I mean, how are you going about figuring out what to do next?
Yeah, so I would say it's a bit of a mix. These first two primary use cases are much more need based, but we do have someone on our team that's responsible for, hey, let's think about from a program standpoint and a partnership standpoint, what is our AI strategy, and what more could we or should we be doing to not only help our partners but just grow the ecosystem to be more successful. So that is, it's not their full-time job, at least not yet, but it is a responsibility for one of the members on my team.
So Rachel, I mean, if you think about it at a broad level, right, whether it's market to or market through or sell through or market with or sell with, sort of to, through, and with kind of motions, are there specific areas that you're using generative AI in specific ways?
I would say it's primarily at this point in stage in our game, it's much more this sell through and sell with. On the marketing side, we are looking at making some investments to enhance our marketing through and market with using generative AI. We recognize there's a massive opportunity for us to enhance what we do when we market with and market through our partners, and generative AI can be a key lever for us there, because I think we are limited by our capacity of our existing team. And so that is another area that we are very early on exploring what the options are, what we could or should be doing there. But I think that's probably the next focus area for not only the leadership of the partnerships team, but working with our field marketing team on what we should be doing there.
That's amazing. Well, this will be definitely a topic of conversation next week when we're at Denver. I look forward to meeting you personally. Thank you for being here. The time just flew by, but it's been amazing, Rachel. I look forward to having a great conversation on the panel next week.
Yes, likewise, looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.